Hello everyone, I love to mine to gather resources in games like 7 Days to Die, Windrose or Valheim. I literally spend hundreds of hours doing this. I love to craft with those resources and to build bases. This is totally fine. I love this kind of gameplay. Here are some of the structures I built in games like this. Here's one of my bases in Valheim. This took a lot of time. I literally spent hundreds of hours in games to gather resources, to mine and to craft. Here we are in the game Windrose. Let's get some wood. In those games I know where to find resources. It's not random number generator on top of random number generator in top of random number generator like it is in Star Citizen. And I don't have to hunt for plus 900 quality resources. Let's take a look at a thread I found recently on Star Citizen. Here we have this thread on Star Citizen, not on refunds. This is the White Knight Star Citizen, and this thread got 333 upvotes. Everything is a grind by Scavaroni. Let's say you want to craft a specific set of armor and weapons. First, use an off-site tool to figure out what missions you need to do to craft those items. Then, grind your ass off doing the same repetitive missions 30 to 40 times to get access to the missions that actually give you the armor pieces you want. And pray to Chris Roberts, the mission you do don't bug out. Yeah, it's pretty much random number generator on top of random number generator on top of random number generator. Of course, you can say CRG is just testing the waters. This is the first iteration of crafting we have in the game. We had some very minor crafting before, like for example crafting a multi-tool. I don't expect perfection from the first iteration. But in year 14 with more than $1 billion in funding, I expect something decent at least. Then grind those missions between 4 to 15 times. Then do the 3 phases again if you want to add a different piece of armor to your outfit, or for that matter, a specific weapon or 2. Then write down the 5 to 10 different materials you need, look in the journal where to find them, and then one by one fly to where one of the materials is supposed to be. Slowly fly between the unknown markers, because if you don't use a mole, you will bump into good rocks you can't break, and the mole is a fucking chonker. Scan each and every rock in any slightly potentially interesting cluster to see the quality of the contents. How long does the scanner take? 20 seconds. Additional 10 seconds before it starts scanning. Maybe you find one good rock after the 10th or 15th attempt. Break the rock and then again scan each of the broken pieces. Hooray! You spent 1 hour or maybe more and you've gotten one of the 7 to 10 materials you want. After days of blueprint farming, preceded by days of mission grinding. This is exactly one of the major issues I have with Star Citizen. In games like 7 Days to Die, Valheim, Windrose, etc., I have a very good idea where to find resources. There's very little random number generator. And if you try to get at those resources in Star Citizen with a prospector, for example, most of those bigger rocks you cannot even touch. You have to use a mole. And let's say you have like 5 or 10 big asteroids or rocks in your field of view. You have to scan each rock one by one. And each time it takes like 20-30 seconds to get a result. And if you want to craft really good items, you have to hunt for plus 900 quality resources. Now repeat this process 7 to 10 times for the additional materials to maybe get a loadout you want. No, fuck this. Life's too fucking short. Ram the mole into the nearest mountain or asteroids. And then do it again, because the mole doesn't die after only one mountain ram. Then do something else. Crafting is good, mining is good, the scanning is too slow and downright bad. Everything being a slow and dumb grind and based on RNG is absolute shite. And I say this as a person who used to be a pretty adamant and persistent farmer in Rust for a good number of years. Yeah, in Star Citizen everything is RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG. I love gathering resources in games, I love mining, I love crafting, I love building bases. But with so much RNG, this is just not fun, Chris. Added, and because people keep coming up with the same two brain cell answer, I've been actively playing this game for 10 years, used the alpha excuse for all those years against naysayers, and I've been playing MMOs for 20 years. Ragnarok Online, Guild Wars, EVE, STO, and I probably missed some. If you think this current grind is good, you have no respect for the limited time you have on this earth. Added 2, I'd bedtime. I'm positively surprised that the majority of players recognize the grind for the BS it is. Cheers and good night. I cannot agree more. Chris seems to think RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG is fun. Scanning each rock one by one, wasting like 20-30 seconds each time is fun. Of course, players shouldn't just snap a finger and it's done. Gathering resources, mining, crafting should take time. But this is way beyond reasonable. Let's take a look at some of the comments. Marash, let's hope there's no downside to avoid crafting completely, which is what I intend to do. Well, there will be, because crafted items are much better than items you can find or buy in the shops if you have high quality resources. Same thing when we get chip and chip component crafting. Your crafted shield generator will be much better than anything you can buy or find in the game. Your crafted chips will be much better than any chip you can buy with real money. I'm fine with crafted items being a little bit better, but this is CIG. My guess is this will be totally out of proportion. Acceptable bit 1019. I hate to be a whiner, but everything is so tedious and unrewarding right now. I said earlier that Star Citizen is starting to feel like a second job, and it's true. Manually, loading and unloading has sucked the fun out of the chillest gameplay loop. Bounty missions are so monotonous now. I used to love hunting down Lethal X in C2s and hammerheads. Now anything above a HRT is just a chore. You can play for hours and feel like you've accomplished nothing and had no fun doing it. Remember what Chris and Tony Surak said about loading, unloading of ships more than 9 years ago. There will be services, there will be machines. We have nothing like this in a game 9 years later. There's some auto-loading in bigger locations, but that's it. No machines, no NPCs helping with loading, unloading.
Steve Apollyon asks, are there any plans on cargo loading of the bigger ships such as the whole series of ships, and is the loading at a space station or even planetary going to be automatic, or will we have specialized small cargo loading ships similar to Argo to load manually if we choose to, similar to the Argo?
Yeah, we have talked about the fact that we don't want the larger ships to basically just park it, click the button, and it's done. That these larger ships that have vast quantities of materials would actually take a significant period of time to unload and may result in missions for NPCs and or other players to actually undertake. We've actually got a pretty comprehensive design right now, but we're still iterating through that because we actually want to unify some of the functionality for loading and unloading.
Like if I have a big container ship and I pull into the port of LA here at Long Beach, there's a whole setup. There's longshoremen, big cranes, and there's service, and the crew of the container ship don't actually unload the containers themselves. There's equipment that does it, and there's people that are paid to do that. And I would say that in general, in sort of the bigger sort of spaceports, you would have that same kind of setup where you would have the ability to unload the bigger ships, unload the containers. Potentially, we've talked about having the ability for players to sort of play the part of a longshoreman if they're running around in a Largo and taking off a container from a Hully and dropping it to another place and doing that, or having AI do that. And then there obviously will be cases where, which is probably a later question we have here, but there'll be manual unloading of cargo where you don't have the sort of big services, like if I just had a ship and I was off the coast somewhere and there wasn't a port, then obviously I would have to be doing it myself. And so I think we've been looking at ways that you have the sort of automatic option that's the services provided.
Automatic option when appropriate, but the fidelity so that on these smaller ships you can actually, and this makes for much more interesting gameplay, and a lot of times in a lot of different cases, because you can imagine scenarios to where you need to deliver a smaller quantity, a half dozen, a dozen, specific crates of some sort of illegal liquor or something to somebody at a planet.
I think so the answer is there will be services, but we'll also have some specialized ships and equipment for unloading cargo.
Obi von Kachovi, it's the number one reason I put the game aside. I wanted to actually play a fun video game, period. Star Citizen has become a chore. Yes, though, I really dislike that all these third-party tools are necessary to play the game in a meaningful manner. Yeah, what would we do without Olakin, without Hercule, without all those other third-party tools? If you want to know anything about chip, weapon and component stats, you have to check out Olakin or Hercule. Year 14, $1 billion in funding, and CIT cannot even do the same thing that Olakin and Hercule are doing for free. Let this sink in. Unusual Wing 1627. It is for now. You are looking at the game from the current state and not what it is meant to be, will be. And you are looking at it from the perspective of doing it all yourself. Remember, this is an MMO. You will and should be interacting with other players, trading and looting and crafting with other people. There are certain issues with this reply. First, yes, this is the first iteration of crafting we have in the game. And like I mentioned, I don't expect perfection. No one expects perfection from a first iteration. But this is just torture. This is RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG. Wasted time on top of wasted time on top of wasted time. And stating this is an MMO, you should interact with other players, you should trade, doesn't help either, because every one of those players want those items. You might be a bit quicker if you are in a big org and everyone doing the thing he is very good at. Still, this is way too grindy. None good left. I keep saying this and keep getting shite for it, but Star Citizen is a free-to-play game that you have to pay to play. By which I mean, in its bones, Star Citizen uses the same shitty grindy tactics as free-to-play games that incentivize paying real money to bypass the grind and to get to the fun part. Hence, why the only place in this game that you can meaningfully level up is in the store. You even get title changes and everything when you level up. Well, let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you craft a lot? Did you get the resources a lot? Did you craft something nice and useful? Thanks for watching. And see you next time. Bye. Auf Wiedersehen. Hey, you're still here. You might want to join me on Twitter or on Blue Sky.